All right, let's print our first color. So I've got my jig all set up, got my screen masked off, I've got 4 sheets of paper, and I've got some ink mixed up. So I mixed a little of the yellow with the white. The white ink is really super thick, so because it's really nice and opaque. So you may decide you want to add just a tiny bit of water to help thin it just a little bit so it'll move. If you add too much water, then your ink is going to become transparent. And for this project, we're going to work on keeping our colors as opaque as possible so that we have really nice areas of solid flat color, and we see how the reductive process works really well. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape my paper just a touch on the top edge and down here so that hopefully I can get it to release nicely from the paper after I've pulled the ink. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rest the edge of my screen up on something. And I didn't mix tons of ink because we're not going to need tons of it for such a small area. And you only have so much ink in your kit, so we want to make sure that we're conserving it. So, but you can always use extra ink to begin future colors if you need something like that as the base. So I'm gonna get my squeegee a little inked up so it moves, and I'm gonna flood the screen. Alright, so I'm gonna put the edge of the screen that's closest to me down into the jig, push it into the corner, and place it down. And now I can give a nice pull and lift that front edge, that leading edge away from me. So immediately you want to rest the edge of your screen on something and flood it so it's filled with ink and ready to go for you. Try to have a piece of paper or something handy so that you can set your squeegee down without making a huge amount of mess. So you can set your screen aside, make sure that it's rested up on something so that the ink is not transferring out. And we got a really nice, dense, even layer of color. So pull those bits of tape off. Gonna set that sheet aside, pull in another one, and I'll run my addition. All right, I'm ready to print my second color. I've reduced down my screen. I created my image on it by tracing some circle templates onto the screen lightly with a pencil. And then I used a brush and my screen filler to brush on this kind of hatch mark pattern. So now, when I print my second color, it's going to pass through everywhere except where the screen filler was applied to the screen. So I've mixed up a color that's pretty close to the first color I was working with because I want to have this sort of subtle hatching kind of thing going on in the background. Then when I print my circles later in another color, they'll really sort of set off from the environment. So I've got my paper all ready. My ink is dry. I know that this is the edge that goes towards my jig because it works with the distance from this edge of the screen, but I can just lay this down and sort of test it out to make sure that it looks as though it's lining up nicely, and it seems as though it does. So I am going to tape down the corners of my paper just like I did before so that I know it's gonna hold down and that will hopefully give my paper the chance to release nicely. The other thing I'm gonna do to help my paper release is I found an old hotel key. You could use an old credit card or gift card or something like that. And I'm just gonna try to create a little bit of space between my paper and the screen so that when I print, I'm going to get a little bit of a release. should have made that a little bit bigger. So I'm going to put this right in the corner of the screen. Just tape that there. And the same thing for the other corners.
Alright, let's see. Now, the only problem with that is I have a little bit of tape overlapping the edge of my screen here, and that's going to cause a change in my registration. So you want to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to affect the registration. So I think what I'm going to do in this corner, because that's my most important corner for registration, is I'm just going to move it in a little bit so that we don't get any interference.
Alright. That looks a little bit better. So, rest this up here. Put my ink down. Get my squeegee ready. Flood the screen. I did not do a very good job of releasing ink from the squeegee there. Alright, got it placed down. I will flood. And I shouldn't have flooded where I did because there was just a little too much pressure and that ink hit the screen again, or the paper again. But what you can see is I've got really nice registration. It lines up really nicely with the edges of the paper. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a quick proof on a piece of paper just to make sure I didn't mess up the back of the screen with a lot of excess ink. Now I'll set this up a little bit higher and flood my screen. Set this over here for a minute and get my next sheet of paper all in order. All right, let's go for press run 3. So I have reduced my screen down. I masked out the background with a little bit more screen filler so that now I'm just going to be printing the circles. I've got my paper all taped down. I've got some pink ink mixed up. So I'm going to give myself a nice little well of ink across the bottom. Flood it. And let's give it a go.
Alright, number 2.
it's time for our fourth color. So I've stopped out the interior of my circles. I've got my print all taped down, ready to go. And I'm going to print with just straight blue this time. Load my screen, switch my print. Time for the debrief. I have my four-color reduction print all completed, and I've gone ahead and started reclaiming my screen. I went ahead and pulled off the masking tape and the contact paper. All I have left in here is screen filler, and I'm going to use the screen wash that is in your kit to remove that stop out from the screen. The screen is stained a little bit, so we'll see how that comes out with the screen wash. One other alternative is soaking the screen in a tray of diluted bleach. That will help dissolve the screen filler, and it might also help a little bit with the staining on the screen. All right, so let's take a look at the prints. So I have my edition of 4. The first one is all right, but there's a little bit of a goof here from when I flooded the screen too close to the paper, and it laid down and put some extra ink and created some messiness. Even so, not terrible. The second one and the third one, I feel like they look pretty good. The fourth one, I was not so careful, and I got some excess ink on the margin out there. So fortunately, it's outside of where I was going to tear my borders, so I think I'll be okay with that. In terms of registration, I feel like the registration is pretty good. Just a few areas, and I think it's this one only. These two, I can see a little bit of an edge on this side of the image. So what else? The image itself, I wish I had allowed myself a little bit more time to plan. I feel pretty good about the image, but I got a little bit nervous about some of the ideas I had when I was waking up this morning and shifted gears. I'm happy enough with it. I'm glad that I allowed myself to just work, because that is something that I don't always do. I tend to spend a lot of time worrying and maybe over planning sometimes. So I really enjoyed just creating the image and letting it develop through the process.